Thank you very much, Luanda. Let me acknowledge you and obviously Tali, who is the moderator, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Let me express appreciation for the members of the diplomatic board that is present here today, and obviously representatives from civil society, in particular the youth formations and young people interested in the world of diplomacy. Let me acknowledge the panelists, Professor Mruti from IJR, Snyder from IGD, and Ms. Pearson from SAIA. I actually wish to confirm, Elizabeth, that indeed today it's about foregrounding African perspectives and providing global insights. So the thematic approach of the South African Institute of International Affairs, it's quite compatible and reconcilable with the conversations that we're having in South Africa this year. I also wish to express my appreciation for Mr. Terry Brown, who, without fail, ladies and gentlemen, and we hope young people will do that, I got a note before I came in of the questions that he typed out that he wanted me to reflect on today at the panel. It's quite a complex matter. I'll take you into confidence on them, but I think it's quite a good example of someone that is passionate about his beliefs and keeping us on our toes or accountable. So thank you very much for that, sir. It's really appreciated. Just as a way of introducing myself, ladies and gentlemen, I'm part of the champions of South Africa's foreign policy, which is premised on 4 concentric circles, amongst others, Pan-Africanism, Global South solidarity, deepening cooperation with the more industrialized economies, and of course, transformation of global governance institutions as a catalyst to deepen multilateralism. Our G20 program today, ladies and gentlemen, carrying the theme of advancing financial inclusion for sustainable development and economic resilience. It's evidently a well-timed intervention and dialogue, given the fact that the entirety of the world is today burdened by what we characterize as a polycrisis. And therefore, financial inclusion is no more a peripheral aspiration, but it is indeed a necessary ambition. It is central, ladies and gentlemen, to the cause of social justice, sustainable development, inclusivity, equity, and peace. 1.4 billion people worldwide remains unbanked. Means 1.4 billion people in the world do not have access to any digital capability in relation to the banking system. And of course, what deepens that purview is that in sub-Saharan Africa, less than half of the people still lack access to basic services. That means, ladies and gentlemen, no bank account, no financial insurance, no credit access, no digital wallet. I suppose you would concur that it is essential not only a deficit in service, but is really an antithesis towards dignity. It is a power deficit, and it is a difficulty for young people in particular in sub-Saharan Africa to maximize what we call the opportunity dividend. It is therefore a basic denial of the right to participate meaningfully in the economic mainstream. Financial exclusions, unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, in South Africa, as well as in the rest of sub-Saharan Africa, still continue to disproportionately affect women, your rural communities, the informal sector, people living with disabilities, and the youth. So our challenges, for example, in South Africa, of trying to mitigate three of your historical antagonism of race, class, and gender. It's a mirror image of what the rest of Africa, and especially sub-Saharan Africa, are faced with. It locks the most vulnerable people into the continuation of a vicious cycle of poverty, stripping them from the possibility of acquiring the necessary tools and possibly to shield them from this polycrisis. Without access to finance, the possibility remains a distant reality for youth and women entrepreneurship. Without the necessary credit facilities, the possibility, ladies and gentlemen, for investment is a distant memory. It therefore holds that financial literacy and services is a key catalyst in our quest to be shock observers in relation to the global economic crisis made increasingly difficult by the war in Ukraine, the genocide in Palestine, and the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic. And that is why South Africa's presidency foreground our approach to our value proposition as an African state to the G20 leaders on equality, sustainability, and solidarity. We do this, ladies and gentlemen, because there is an appreciation that apart from the need to transform your global economic and financial architecture, what is a must is the centrality of social justice, equity in relation to that transformation agenda. We know very well that probably half of the delegates today in this plenary hall and 95% of our virtual attendees were not born in 1944 when the Brethren institutions were constructed. It therefore holds, ladies and gentlemen, that 80 years later, this particular architecture on financial and economic mechanism is no longer fit for purpose. Emerging markets and developing emerging economies, including those in Africa, remain underrepresented in decision making. Stringent conditionalities attached to financial assistance have in many cases imposed harsher obligations on recipient African states in particular. And therefore, one of the key aspects in our G20 presidency that we are continuing to champion, ladies and gentlemen, is the high cost of debt, in particular for highly indebted, low-income countries. We are therefore continuing to call for the adequate reform of these global financial institutions, to continue to expand the voice of the developing South. Ladies and gentlemen, our presidency of the G20 therefore have to ensure that the consequent imperative for financing for development should be rooted in the needs of the poorest of the poor. It should be powered by inclusive technology. And it's for this very reason that artificial intelligence is a key catalyst for innovative technologies. It's part of our G20 value proposition. Given the fact, ladies and gentlemen, that we do regard artificial intelligence and technological innovation as a key enabler towards adequate financial inclusion. We have increasingly witnessed in South Africa in particular that mobile banking, digital identification documents, and fintech platforms are transforming our rural economies. We have witnessed in Kenya the M-Pesa system, and we have seen the appropriateness, ladies and gentlemen, of blockchain-backed microcredit schemes in Asia. But it is our submission that these gains remain uneven in South Africa, in SADC, and in particular in sub-Saharan Africa. We, of course, have to guide between the pitfalls of this new technology, especially in relation to digital divide, where the tools of inclusion becomes the instrument for exclusion for those without the necessary connectivity, digital literacy, or those that continue to have a deficit of trust in digital systems. And that is why, ladies and gentlemen, public policy should remain ahead of innovation. Regulations must be inclusive, it must be adaptive, but more importantly, ladies and gentlemen, it must be rights-based. Digital public infrastructure should be universal, secure in South Africa and in the developing South. We continue to underscore that digital finance must be reconcilable with broader social goals, which include, amongst others, access to healthcare, basic and primary education, integrated food systems, and be climate resilient. Here in South Africa, we are, ladies and gentlemen, trying to do our bit by advancing innovative models through the supporting of township and rural enterprises through various blended finance schemes and the rolling out of rural financial literacy initiatives, particularly in underbanked communities, which we hope will continue to create adequate pathways for women and youth-led businesses to access financial capital. This is key and critical, ladies and gentlemen, given the fact that when South Africa chaired the African Union, the financial inclusion of African women was a key priority during our chairship. It therefore holds, ladies and gentlemen, that agricultural financial initiatives, particularly for women in agri-food systems, are key catalysts to advance the Sustainable Development Goals, in particular SDG Goal 2, which advocate for zero hunger, whilst continuing to drive inclusive green economic growth. Ladies and gentlemen, as I conclude, the future of global growth lies therefore not in the already saturated markets in the more industrialized economies, but it are located within the opportunity dividend within Africa. And therefore, for the successful implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area, ACFTA, and for the successful mobilization of Africa's young people as a democratic dividend, creative, digital-based enterprises is a key imperative. I obviously wish to thank you, and I must take you into confidence that we have very high expectations, Luanda, for the three panelists that we'll be discussing today, because I've said to them that the biggest disappointment when you come to an engagement like this is if you learn nothing. So if the splintery and young people on the digital platform doesn't go away with one impressive connotation, then Elizabeth, this engagement would not be successful. I wish you well, and I am very positive that you will honor the minimum expectations that we have. Thank you very much.